My mom created a golden child system where only the sibling with the highest GPA got hot meals, a bedroom, and goodnight hugs, while the rest of us got nothing. When I refused to sabotage my siblings like she wanted, she made me sleep on a mattress in the garage and eat standing at the counter. Then I got a 2 a.m. call from my youngest sister, whispering for help from the basement, where mom had locked her for burning her tests, and I found her down to 89 pounds with infected cuts on her arms.
Growing up, my parents only rewarded us for one thing: getting better grades than each other. I remember being 6 years old coming home with a B while my brother came home with an A. He got takeout that night, stayed up past bedtime watching cartoons, and went toy shopping. I got his cold leftovers and slept without blankets in the middle of January. My mom called it the golden child system. Every report card day, she'd line me and my 3 siblings up in the living room and go through our grades one by one. Whoever had the highest GPA became the golden child that semester. They got everything: hot meals, their own room with heat, goodnight hugs, weekend trips to the mall. The rest of us got nothing. At first, my siblings and I just tried harder. I stayed up late studying with a flashlight under my covers. My younger brother Piper would read during recess. My sister Ava practiced math problems during lunch. But then something changed around middle school. My youngest sister Lynn started putting sleeping pills in Piper's morning orange juice before big tests. Ava would delete my essays from the family computer and claim it was a glitch. Piper started hiding my textbooks. Mom loved it. She'd find Ava's stash of my homework and smile. "Smart girl," she'd say. "You understand how the world works." I was the oldest and maybe the stupidest because I refused to play their game. When I caught Lynn crying over her failed science test, I helped her study for the retake. When Piper's calculator broke before his algebra final, I lent him mine. I kept thinking if I showed them kindness, we'd stop sabotaging each other. But then Mom caught me helping Lynn with her biology homework one night. She grabbed my hair and yanked me out of the chair so hard I felt strands rip from my scalp. She dragged me to my room and shoved me against the wall. "You're making her weak," she hissed in my face. Her breath smelled like wine. After that night, she moved my mattress to the garage because failures didn't deserve comfort, and took my bedroom door off its hinges because privacy was for winners. I ate dinner standing at the kitchen counter while my siblings sat at the table. The worst part was watching their faces. They looked guilty but never said anything. They were too scared of Mom. That night I decided I would rebel in my own way by maintaining a C average through high school, just enough to pass, but low enough to let Mom know she couldn't break me. My siblings, on the other hand, all had stellar GPAs, all had scholarship offers, but they also had ulcers and anxiety attacks and prescriptions they hid from each other. Ava got hospitalized junior year for taking too much Adderall. It all came to a head the night before graduation. Mom changed the locks while I was at work. I came home to my stuff thrown on the lawn. My baby pictures were torn up and scattered in the driveway. My mom stood in the doorway with her arms around my siblings. "Don't come back until you're worth something," she said. I could see Lynn opening her mouth like she was going to say something, until Mom shot her a dagger that made her face turn pale. She said nothing. They all watched me load my car in the rain and nobody helped. My graduation the next day had 4 empty reserved seats in the front row. College was weird at first. My roommate's parents visited for Thanksgiving and brought me a pie because they felt bad I was staying on campus. His mom hugged me and I flinched so hard I knocked over a lamp. My psychology professor complimented my essay and I had a panic attack in the bathroom because I was waiting for the punishment. I slept on the floor for a month because the bed felt wrong, too soft and unearned. I called home once to check on my siblings about halfway through the semester to ask how things were going. What I was told upset me, but it didn't surprise me. Piper said all my siblings had started recording each other's conversations to catch mistakes. Lynn had hidden cameras set up in Ava's room to catch her cheating or not studying so she could report to Mom. Ava had started stealing Piper's medication. The competition was worse without me there. Someone had to lose for the others to win. It was absolutely heartbreaking to hear. I started thinking of a way out for my siblings. I was getting somewhere, and that's when last week Lynn called me. Her voice was shaking and she was whispering like Mom might hear through the walls. "I can't survive this anymore," she said. "Please come save us. I'm so sorry for everything." I remember hearing a loud thud right after, followed by my mom yelling something incoherent. I tried to yell, but the line went dead. It was 2 a.m., but I still ran outside and got in my car to make the 4-hour journey home. When I got there, I found Lynn locked in the basement. Turns out Mom had converted it into a study room with no windows and a lock on the outside. Lynn was down to 89 pounds. She showed me infected cuts on her arms from stress scratching. She'd been burning her test to stay off Mom's achievement board, but Mom caught her. She hadn't been allowed to use the bathroom in 3 days. There were buckets in the corner. Mom came running down screaming about how I was ruining her winter. I carried Lynn to my car while Mom followed us outside shrieking that we were both failures and we deserved each other. As I drove away, Lynn was half conscious in the passenger seat. I kept checking the rearview mirror as we drove, half expecting to see Mom's car following us. Lynn had passed out completely, her breathing shallow but steady. The hospital was another hour away, and I pressed harder on the gas pedal. When we finally arrived at the emergency room, the nurses took one look at Lynn and rushed her straight back. I filled out paperwork with shaking hands, listing myself as her emergency contact. The receptionist asked about insurance, and I handed over my student card, praying my university coverage would work. 3 hours later, a doctor came out to talk to me. Lynn was severely malnourished and dehydrated. The cuts on her arms were infected and needed antibiotics. They wanted to keep her for observation. I nodded at everything he said, trying not to think about how I'd pay for it all. Lynn woke up around noon the next day. She looked so small in the hospital bed, hooked up to IV fluids. When she saw me sitting in the chair beside her, tears started rolling down her cheeks. I grabbed her hand and squeezed it gently. She squeezed back, and we sat like that for a long time without talking. Eventually, she told me everything. How Mom had gotten worse after I left. How the competition between siblings had turned vicious. How she'd been locked in that basement for 2 weeks, only let out for an hour each day to shower and change clothes. The nurse brought Lynn some broth and crackers. She ate slowly, wincing with each swallow. I helped her sit up and adjust the pillows behind her back. When she finished eating, she looked at me with hollow eyes. I knew what she was asking without her saying it. Could we go back for Piper and Ava? Were they suffering too? Part of me wanted to say no. They'd watched Mom throw my stuff on the lawn. They'd participated in the sabotage for years. But then I remembered they were victims too, just trying to survive in their own ways. That evening, I called Piper from the hospital lobby. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice hushed. I told him Lynn was safe and asked if he wanted to leave too. There was a long pause. Then he hung up. I tried calling back, but he didn't answer. I tried Ava next. She picked up immediately, almost like she'd been waiting. Before I could say anything, she started talking fast. Mom knew I'd taken Lynn. She was furious. She'd already changed the locks again and installed security cameras. Ava's voice cracked as she told me Mom had moved all of Lynn's belongings to the curb and burned them in the backyard. I asked Ava if she wanted out. Another long pause. Then she whispered that she couldn't talk anymore and hung up. I stood in that hospital lobby feeling helpless. How could I save people who didn't want to be saved? Lynn was released after 4 days. The bill was astronomical, but the hospital set up a payment plan. I drove us back to my college apartment, stopping at a thrift store to buy her some clothes and basic necessities. My roommate was gone for winter break, so Lynn took his bed. Those first few days were rough. Lynn jumped at every sound. She'd wake up screaming from nightmares. She kept apologizing for things that weren't her fault. I made her simple meals and didn't push her to talk. Slowly, she started to relax. She even smiled once when I burned our mac and cheese because I was distracted doing homework. A week after we'd left, my phone rang at 3 a.m. It was Piper. His voice was shaking. Mom had found his hidden stash of anxiety medication and flushed it all. He was going through withdrawal and didn't know what to do. I told him to pack a bag and meet me at the gas station 2 blocks from the house. I left Lynn sleeping and drove through the night again. Piper was waiting at the gas station, hunched over with a backpack. He looked terrible, sweating, shaking, dark circles under his eyes. He climbed into my car without a word. The drive back was silent except for Piper's occasional groans. I stopped at a 24-hour pharmacy and explained the situation to the pharmacist. She couldn't give him medication without a prescription, but she suggested an urgent care clinic that opened at 7 a.m. We waited in the parking lot until they opened. The doctor at urgent care was understanding. He prescribed a small amount of medication to help with withdrawal and gave us a referral to a psychiatrist. Piper took the first dose right there in the exam room. When we got back to my apartment, Lynn was awake and making coffee. She froze when she saw Piper, then ran over and hugged him. He hugged her back, and they both started crying. I left them alone and went to take a shower, letting the hot water wash away the exhaustion. Over the next few days, the 3 of us developed a routine. I went to classes while they stayed in the apartment. Lynn started teaching herself to cook from YouTube videos. Piper organized my bookshelf and cleaned obsessively, needing something to control. In the evenings, we'd eat dinner together at my tiny kitchen table. Nobody sat on the floor or stood at the counter. Then Ava called. Mom had kicked her out. She'd caught Ava trying to call me and went ballistic. Ava was at a friend's house but couldn't stay there long. I gave her my address and told her to take a bus. She arrived the next evening with a suitcase and a black eye. Mom had hit her with a textbook. We didn't talk about it. I just got her some ice and made up a bed on the couch. That night, all 4 of us were together for the first time in years without Mom hovering over us. But I knew this was just the beginning. Mom wouldn't let us go that easily. She'd already left dozens of voicemails calling us ungrateful failures. She'd shown up at my university looking for me, but campus security turned her away. She'd filed a missing persons report for Lynn, claiming I'd kidnapped her. The police showed up at my apartment to do a welfare check. Lynn told them she was 18 and had left voluntarily. They seemed satisfied and left, but I knew Mom would try something else. She always had another move planned. My siblings were struggling too. They'd been conditioned for so long to compete with each other that cooperation felt foreign. Ava hoarded food in her suitcase. Piper timed how long everyone used the bathroom. Lynn apologized constantly for taking up space. Old habits died hard. We needed help. Real professional help. I made appointments with the counseling center at my university. They had a sliding scale payment option. I also reached out to legal aid about getting restraining orders. The lawyer said we had a strong case given the documented abuse. But even as I tried to build us a new life, I could feel Mom's presence looming. She knew where I went to school. She had ways of finding information, and she'd never admit defeat. The golden child system had been her life's work. We were her trophies, her proof that her methods worked. I started varying my route to class, checking over my shoulder constantly. I installed new locks on my apartment door and a security bar for extra protection. I taught my siblings our emergency plan if Mom showed up. We were living in fear, but at least we were living. One morning, I woke up to find a note slipped under my door. Mom's handwriting. You can't hide forever. A real family sticks together. Come home before it's too late. My hands shook as I read it. She'd been here. She'd stood right outside while we slept. I showed the note to my siblings at breakfast. Lynn went pale. Piper's hands started trembling, but Ava surprised me. She grabbed the note and tore it into pieces. She can't control us anymore, she said firmly. It was the first time any of them had shown defiance. That afternoon, we all went to the counseling center together. The therapist was kind but direct. She explained that what we'd experienced was severe psychological abuse, that Mom's system had pitted us against each other to maintain control, that healing would take time and effort from all of us. As we walked back to my apartment after the session, something felt different. We were walking side by side instead of in a line. Nobody was checking to see who was walking faster or straighter. For the first time, we felt like actual siblings instead of competitors. But I knew our fight wasn't over. Mom was still out there, planning her next move, and we were still learning how to trust each other after years of sabotage and betrayal. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but at least now, we were walking it together. That night, as we sat around my small living room doing homework and watching TV, I realized something. We might have lost our childhood to Mom's twisted system, but we still had a chance at a future. A real future where love wasn't conditional on achievement and family meant support instead of competition. The next morning brought an unexpected development. Piper discovered Mom had canceled his health insurance. The psychiatrist appointment we'd scheduled was now impossible without paying out of pocket. He paced the apartment, pulling at his hair while I made frantic calls to the university health center. They could see him in 2 weeks, but his medication would run out before then. Lynn suggested we try different pharmacies to see if anyone would help. We spent the entire day driving from one to another, explaining our situation. Each pharmacist shook their heads sympathetically but firmly. Without a valid prescription, they couldn't help. Piper grew more agitated with each rejection, his withdrawal symptoms worsening. That evening, Ava surprised us all. She'd been quietly researching online and found a telehealth service that could prescribe medication after a video consultation. The appointment cost $89, which meant I'd have to skip groceries for the week, but Piper needed help immediately. We huddled around my laptop as he spoke with the doctor, who prescribed a week's worth of medication to bridge the gap. Relief washed over Piper's face when he swallowed the first med, but our victory was short-lived. Mom had been busy. She'd called my university claiming I was mentally unstable and holding my siblings hostage. The dean of students left a voicemail requesting an urgent meeting. My stomach churned as I listened to the message 3 times. I went to the meeting alone, armed with documentation from the hospital about Lynn's condition. The dean listened patiently as I explained our family situation. She seemed sympathetic, but warned that any disruption to my academic performance or campus life would have consequences. I left her office feeling like I was walking a tightrope. When I returned to the apartment, I found my siblings huddled together on the couch. They'd received a package. Inside was a photo album filled with pictures from our childhood, happy moments before the golden child system started. There was a note in Mom's handwriting. Remember when we were a real family? It's not too late to come home. Lynn started crying. Piper stared at a photo of all of us at the beach, back when we still smiled genuinely. Even Ava seemed affected, tracing her finger over a picture of Mom pushing her on a swing. I wanted to grab the album and throw it away, but I couldn't. These were the only photos we had left of our childhood. The emotional manipulation continued. Mom started sending individual texts to each sibling, tailored to their specific vulnerabilities. She promised Piper she'd refill all his medications if he came home. She told Ava she'd already set aside money for her graduate school. She assured Lynn that the basement was being renovated into a proper bedroom. I watched my siblings' faces as they read these messages, the doubt creeping in, the longing for a mother who'd never truly existed. We'd escaped physically, but Mom still had hooks in their minds. Years of conditioning didn't disappear overnight. Ava was the first to crack. I came home from class to find her packing her suitcase. She couldn't meet my eyes as she explained that Mom had promised to pay for her law school applications. All she had to do was come home for a week to talk things through. I tried reasoning with her, reminding her of the black eye that had barely faded, but Ava's ambition had always been her weakness, and Mom knew exactly which buttons to push. I drove Ava to the bus station in silence. At the departure gate, she hugged me quickly and whispered an apology. Mom slipping notes under doors like some kind of reverse tooth fairy who takes your peace of mind instead of teeth. That's next level creepy. I watched her board the bus, us, knowing in my gut that this was a mistake, but I couldn't force her to stay. That would make me no better than Mom. The apartment felt emptier without Ava. Lynn and Piper grew quieter, probably wondering if they should leave too. I threw myself into keeping them busy. We cooked elaborate meals together, played board games, went for walks around campus. Anything to avoid thinking about what Ava might be experiencing back home. 3 days passed with no word from Ava. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Mom posted photos on social media of Ava studying at the dining room table, looking perfectly normal, but I knew those photos were staged. Everything in that house was a performance. On the 4th day, Piper's phone rang during dinner. It was Ava, but something was wrong. Her voice sounded flat, rehearsed. She told Piper that living with me was a mistake, that I was holding them back from their potential, that Mom had their best interests at heart. Piper put the call on speaker, and we all heard Mom whispering in the background, coaching Ava on what to say. After Ava hung up, we sat in stunned silence. Mom had broken her in just 4 days. Or maybe Ava was playing along to survive. Either way, she was lost to us for now. Lynn grabbed my hand under the table, and I squeezed it reassuringly. We couldn't save someone who didn't want to be saved. The next phase of Mom's campaign was more aggressive. She started showing up at my university at random times. I'd spot her car in the parking lot after class. She'd be sitting in the student union when I went for coffee, always watching, never approaching, just reminding me that she could reach me whenever she wanted. Campus security couldn't do much since she wasn't technically harassing anyone. She had every right to be in public spaces. I started taking different routes, ducking into buildings when I saw her, feeling like prey being stalked. My grades began to slip from the stress. One afternoon, I returned from class to find my apartment door slightly open. My heart pounded as I pushed it wider. The place had been searched, nothing stolen, but everything moved slightly. Drawers opened, papers shuffled, beds disturbed. The message was clear. Mom could get to us even here. Lynn and Piper were at the library, thankfully. I called them and told them to stay there while I filed a report with campus police. The officer took notes but seemed skeptical. No forced entry, nothing missing. Without evidence, they couldn't do much. I felt the walls closing in. That night, we pushed the couch against the door and took turns keeping watch. None of us slept well. In the morning, I found another note under the door. Stop this foolishness. You're hurting your siblings. A good daughter would bring them home. I was running out of money. Between the extra food, Piper's medication, and the security measures, my savings were depleted. I picked up extra shifts at the campus bookstore, but it wasn't enough. Lynn offered to find a job, but she didn't have any documents. Mom had destroyed them all. The financial pressure was part of Mom's plan. She knew I couldn't support 3 people on a student budget. She was waiting for us to get desperate enough to come crawling back. I started skipping meals so my siblings could eat. They noticed but didn't say anything. 2 weeks after Ava left, she called again. This time, her voice was different, urgent. She spoke quickly, saying Mom was at her weekly wine club. Ava told us that Mom had locked her in her room at night, that she'd been forced to study for the LSAT 16 hours a day, that Mom had taken her phone and only let her use it for supervised calls. Before we could respond, we heard a door slam in the background. Ava gasped and hung up. We tried calling back, but the number was blocked. I wanted to drive there immediately, but Lynn pointed out it could be a trap. Mom might be using Ava to lure us back. We spent hours debating what to do. Piper thought we should call the police, but what would we say? That a 20-year-old was studying too much? Lynn suggested we try to sneak Ava out during Mom's wine club, but we didn't know when that was. I felt paralyzed by indecision. The next morning changed everything. Mom had escalated beyond psychological warfare. She'd called my employer claiming I'd stolen from the register. She'd contacted my professors saying I was cheating on assignments. She'd even reached out to my roommate's parents with lies about substance use in our apartment. I spent the entire day in damage control mode. My manager reviewed security footage that proved I'd never stolen anything. My professors were understanding but concerned. My roommate's parents were harder to convince. The stress was overwhelming. Mom was systematically trying to destroy the life I'd built. Lynn and Piper watched me field phone calls and emails, their faces grave. They understood now that Mom wouldn't stop. She'd keep escalating until we either returned or were completely destroyed. There was no middle ground in her world. That evening, I made a decision. We couldn't keep playing defense. We needed to go on the offensive, but not in the way Mom expected. Instead of fighting her directly, we'd make ourselves impossible to find. It was time to disappear completely. I researched cities far from our hometown, places where Mom had no connections, where we could start fresh with new identities, at least socially. It would mean dropping out of school, leaving everything behind. But what choice did we have? Lynn was immediately on board. She had nothing left to lose. Piper was more hesitant. His medication situation made moving complicated. But after Mom sent him photos of his old room with the caption, "Waiting for you," he agreed. We couldn't leave Ava behind though. Somehow we had to get her out first. I spent the next week quietly preparing. I withdrew my remaining savings in cash, packed our few belongings into boxes, gave notice at my job, telling them I had a family emergency. My professors were understanding when I explained I needed to take a leave of absence. Meanwhile, we worked on a plan to extract Ava. Lynn had an idea. She still had the password to an old email account Ava had forgotten about. We could communicate through drafts, never sending anything that Mom could intercept. It was risky, but it was our only shot. The first draft we left was simple. We're getting out. All of us. Be ready. We checked obsessively for a response. 2 days later, Ava had written back, "Mom watches everything. Wine club is Thursday 7 to 10 p.m. Back door broken lock." We had a window, a 3-hour opportunity while Mom was out, but it would mean driving back to the house we'd fled from, walking back into the trap. Everything in me screamed that this was a bad idea, but I couldn't abandon Ava. I rented a car under a friend's name, paying cash. We drove through the night, arriving in our hometown as the sun rose. We parked several blocks away and waited. The neighborhood looked exactly the same. Normal houses with normal families. No one would guess the horror inside that perfect suburban home. Thursday evening came slowly. We watched from our car as Mom left for wine club, dressed impeccably as always. We waited another 15 minutes to make sure she wasn't coming back. Then we moved quickly. The back door was indeed broken, just as Ava had said. We slipped inside silently. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and something else. Fear. I remembered that smell from my childhood. We found Ava in her room, already packed. She looked thinner, with dark circles under her eyes, but she was ready. We were almost to the back door when we heard it. The front door opening. Mom's voice calling out cheerfully that she'd forgotten her wine. We froze. There was no way to get to our car without her seeing us. We were trapped in our childhood home with a woman who tormented us for years. I pushed my siblings into the pantry and closed the door. We held our breath as Mom's heels clicked across the kitchen floor. She hummed while opening the wine fridge, the same tune she used to hum while deciding our punishments. My heart hammered so loudly I was sure she'd hear it. The wine bottle clinked as she removed it. Her footsteps paused near the pantry. We pressed against the walls, trying to become invisible. After an eternity, she walked away. The front door closed. We waited another 5 minutes before emerging, our legs shaking. We ran to the car and drove away fast. No one spoke for the first hour. We were all processing what had just happened, how close we'd come to being caught, what Mom might have done if she'd found us. Ava finally broke the silence, thanking us for coming back. Her voice cracked as she described the past 2 weeks. Mom had been retraining her, making her recite the family rules every morning, punishing her for showing weakness by wanting to leave. The studying was just a cover. The real goal was to break Ava's spirit completely, to turn her into the perfect golden child who would never abandon Mom again. We drove through the night, taking turns at the wheel. By morning, we were 5 states away. I'd chosen a mid-sized city with a low cost of living and decent job market. We found a cheap motel and collected collapsed into beds, exhausted but free. The next few weeks were about survival. I got a job at a restaurant lying about my experience. Lynn found work at a daycare that didn't check references too carefully. Piper got hired at a bookstore. Ava took online freelance work, using her academic skills to tutor students. Together, we scraped together enough for a small apartment. It wasn't easy. We all struggled with nightmares. Piper had panic attacks in crowded spaces. Lynn flinched whenever someone raised their voice. Ava obsessively checked locks. I jumped every time my phone rang. But slowly, we began to heal. We found a therapist who specialized in family trauma and offered sliding scale payments. In group sessions, we learned to communicate without competition, to support each other without keeping score, to love without conditions. It was like learning a new language. Mom didn't give up easily. She hired a private investigator to find us. We knew because he showed up at Piper's bookstore asking questions. But we'd prepared for this. We'd all agreed on a story. We were cousins, not siblings. Our parents had died in an accident. We'd moved here for a fresh start. The investigator left empty-handed. The calls and messages continued for months. Mom cycled through every manipulation tactic. Rage, guilt, false sweetness, threats, promises. We changed our numbers. She found the new ones. We changed them again. It became a routine, like taking out the trash. 6 months into our new life, something shifted. The messages became less frequent. The attempts to find us grew half-hearted. Maybe Mom had realized we weren't coming back, or maybe she'd found new targets for her twisted system. We didn't know and tried not to care. We celebrated our first holidays together as a real family. No achievement boards or competitions, just 4 damaged siblings learning to love each other properly. We cooked together, decorating cookies badly and laughing about it. We gave small gifts that had nothing to do with grades or performance. Lynn started community college, studying to become a social worker. She wanted to help kids trapped in abusive homes. Piper found a better psychiatrist and got properly diagnosed and medicated. His anxiety became manageable. Ava decided against law school, realizing she'd only wanted it to win Mom's approval. She started writing instead, pouring our story into fiction that helped her process the trauma. I went back to school part-time, juggling work and classes. It was hard, but I wasn't doing it for anyone else's approval. My grades mattered only to me now. Nothing says stealth mission like 3 siblings hiding in a pantry while Mom hums her evil punishment tune like she's in some twisted musical. I bet they were all trying not to sneeze or breathe too loud while squished between the canned beans and pasta boxes. And then the private investigator shows up asking questions and they're all cousins now, which is such a classic move when you're trying to dodge your family drama. Plus, I love how they kept changing phone numbers like it's some kind of weird game of telephone tag with Mom, who just won't take the hint that maybe they don't want to chat about achievement boards anymore. My siblings cheered when I passed my first semester, not because I'd struck them, but because they were genuinely proud. We still had bad days, moments when the old patterns tried to resurface, when Piper timed how long Lynn showered, when Ava hoarded snacks, when Lynn apologized for breathing too loudly, when I caught myself comparing our achievements. But we recognized these moments now, called them out gently, worked through them together. The apartment was small and cramped. We shared 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. Money was always tight, but for the first time in our lives, we felt safe. We ate dinner together at a real table. We helped each other with homework without sabotage. We celebrated each other's successes without resentment. Sometimes I wondered about other families, the ones where parents loved unconditionally, where siblings were allies, not competitors, where home meant safety, not survival. We'd never have that childhood, but maybe we could build something better. A family we chose, bonds we forged ourselves. Late at night, when my siblings were asleep, I'd think about Mom, alone in that big house with her achievement boards and golden child throne. Did she realize what she'd lost? Did she ever feel regret? Or was she already grooming new victims, perfecting her system on other children? I pushed those thoughts away. Mom was our past. We had worked too hard to let her shadow follow us into our future. We'd escaped not just physically, but mentally. We'd broken the cycle. Our children, if we ever had them, would never know the golden child system. They'd know love without conditions, support without competition. The road ahead was still uncertain. We had no extended family to fall back on, no safety net except each other. But we'd survived the worst thing imaginable, a mother who turned love into a weapon. Everything else felt manageable in comparison. As our first year of freedom drew to a close, we gathered in our tiny living room for a family meeting. Not the kind where Mom lined us up for judgment, but a real discussion about our future. Where did we want to be in 5 years? What dreams had we buried that we could now pursue? The conversation lasted hours. We cried, laughed, and planned. For the first time, we weren't thinking about survival. We were thinking about living, about the people we could become without Mom's voice in our heads telling us we weren't enough. That night, I looked around at my siblings. Lynn, finally gaining healthy weight and smiling freely. Piper, medication stable and cracking jokes. Ava, writing stories instead of plotting sabotage. We'd lost so much, but we'd found each other, and that was everything. The year anniversary of our escape was approaching when Mom made her boldest move yet. I came home from my restaurant shift to find Piper sitting on our apartment steps, his face ashen. He handed me an envelope without speaking. Inside was a court summons. Mom was petitioning for conservatorship over Lynn, claiming she was mentally incompetent and needed to return home for proper care. My hands trembled as I read the legal jargon. Mom had hired an expensive lawyer. She'd gathered statements from neighbors who'd seen Lynn's condition when I'd taken her. She'd even gotten her doctor friend to write that Lynn needed immediate psychiatric intervention. The hearing was in 2 weeks. We couldn't afford a lawyer. I spent the next 3 days calling every legal aid organization in our city. Most had waitlists months long. One finally agreed to review our case, but they made no promises. The paralegal who took our information sounded overwhelmed and exhausted. Lynn barely ate for days after learning about the petition. She started checking the locks obsessively again, convinced Mom would show up any moment to drag her back. Ava researched conservatorship laws online until her eyes burned. Piper cleaned the apartment compulsively, as if a spotless home would somehow protect us. I took extra shifts at work, hoping to save enough for at least a consultation with a real lawyer. My manager noticed my exhaustion and pulled me aside. When I broke down and explained our situation, she gave me the number of her cousin who'd just passed the bar exam. He agreed to meet with us for a reduced fee. The young lawyer, Nathaniel, reviewed our documentation with a frown. Mom's petition was thorough. She'd painted herself as a concerned mother trying to save her daughter from a negligent sibling. She'd conveniently left out the basement imprisonment and abuse. Without proof, it would be our word against hers. We spent the next week gathering evidence. The hospital records from Lynn's admission helped, showing malnutrition and infected wounds. We got statements from my professors about my stability. Lynn's employer at the daycare wrote about her reliability and gentle nature with the children. It felt like building a sandcastle against a tsunami. 3 days before the hearing, Ava made a discovery. While organizing our documents, she found something we'd overlooked. Photos on Lynn's old phone that she'd managed to take of the basement room. The lock on the outside of the door. The buckets in the corner. Her own injured arms. They were dark and blurry, but they were evidence. Nathaniel's eyes lit up when we showed him. This changed everything. He spent the next 2 days preparing our defense, coaching Lynn on what to expect during questioning. She practiced her answers until her voice stopped shaking. We all took the day off work for the hearing. The courthouse felt impossibly large as we walked in. Mom was already there with her lawyer, wearing a conservative suit and her concerned mother mask. She tried to approach Lynn in the hallway, but Nathaniel stepped between them. Mom's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the fury underneath. Inside the courtroom, Mom's lawyer painted a picture of a loving mother desperate to help her struggling daughter. He presented the neighbor statements, the doctor's letter, photos of Lynn's clean, furnished bedroom at home. He implied I'd brainwashed my siblings, that I was keeping them from their family out of spite. When it was our turn, Nathaniel methodically dismantled their narrative. He presented the hospital records, highlighting that Lynn's condition was consistent with prolonged abuse, not mental illness. He showed the photos from Lynn's phone. He had each of us describe the golden child system in detail. Lynn testified last. Her voice was quiet but steady as she described the basement imprisonment, the achievement board, the punishments for failing to compete. The judge, an older woman with kind eyes, listened intently. Mom's lawyer tried to suggest Lynn was confused, possibly delusional. Lynn simply showed the scars on her arms. The judge called a recess. We sat in the hallway, hands clasped together, waiting. Mom paced near the windows, her lawyer whispering urgently to her. When we were called back, the judge's expression was stern. She denied Mom's petition completely. She stated that the evidence clearly showed Lynn was thriving in her current environment and that returning home would be detrimental to her well-being. She warned Mom that any further harassment could result in criminal charges. Mom's face went white, then red. Her lawyer had to physically guide her from the courtroom as she sputtered protests. We stumbled out of the courthouse in a daze. It was over. Mom's biggest weapon, the legal system she'd tried to use against us, had failed. Nathaniel shook our hands, refusing our attempts to pay his full fee. He said seeing Mom's face when she lost was payment enough, but Mom wasn't finished. If she couldn't use the law, she'd use other methods. 2 weeks later, our landlord informed us that someone had called claiming we were dealing substances from the apartment. He didn't believe it, but he had to investigate. We let him search every inch of our home, grateful we'd earned his trust over the past year. Then came the calls to our employers. Mom posed as a concerned citizen, reporting that we were dangerous, unstable, had criminal records. My manager recognized her voice from my descriptions and hung up on her. But Piper's bookstore was part of a chain with corporate policies. They suspended him pending an investigation. The stress was affecting all of us. Ava started having nightmares again. Lynn developed a nervous habit of pulling out her eyebrow hairs. I caught myself checking the locks as obsessively as they did. We were free from Mom physically, but she still haunted us. One evening, as we sat around our small table eating another budget dinner, Ava suggested something radical. What if we confronted Mom directly, not alone, but together? All four of us showing her that her system had failed, that we were united now in a way her competition could never achieve. The idea terrified me, but I saw something in my siblings' faces. They were tired of running, tired of looking over their shoulders. Maybe facing her would break her hold on us once and for all. We spent days debating, planning, preparing what we'd say. We chose a public place, a coffee shop in our old town. We drove there on a Sunday morning. All four of us squeezed into my hit-up car. The familiar streets looked smaller than I remembered. The house we'd grown up in looked ordinary from the outside, hiding its dark secrets. Mom arrived exactly on time, alone as we'd requested. She looked older, diminished somehow. Her perfect hair had gray roots. Her designer clothes hung loose on her frame. She sat across from us, her face cycling through emotions as she tried to find the right mask to wear. I explained our terms. No more contact, no more harassment, no more attempts to tear us apart. If she continued, we'd pursue a restraining order and criminal charges for the years of abuse. We had evidence now, witnesses, a paper trail of her harassment. The golden child system was over. Mom's masks fell away completely then. She looked at us with naked desperation, realizing she'd lost control forever. She tried several tactics in rapid succession. Tears, promising she'd changed. Anger, threatening to disinherit us. Bargaining, offering money if just one of us would come home. Finally, cold fury, hissing that we'd regret this when we realized how cruel the world was without her protection. We stood up together. Lynn looked her in the eye for the first time in years. Piper's hands were steady. Ava's chin was raised. I felt their strength flowing through me. We walked out without looking back, leaving Mom alone with her cold coffee and shattered system. The drive home was quiet but peaceful. Something had shifted. The specter of Mom that had haunted us for so long felt smaller, less powerful. She was just a lonely woman clinging to control she'd never really had. We'd given her power over us for so long, but no more. Piper got his job back after the investigation found nothing. He even got a small raise as an apology for the inconvenience. Lynn started talking about maybe pursuing her social work degree full-time. Ava's writing grew stronger, more confident. She started submitting stories to literary magazines. 3 months passed without word from Mom, then 6 months. The hypervigilance slowly faded. We stopped checking the locks so often. The nightmares became less frequent. We still had bad days, moments when the old patterns tried to resurface, but they were fewer and farther between. On the second anniversary of our escape, we held another family meeting. This time, we weren't planning survival strategies or discussing Mom. We were talking about normal things. Piper wanted to save up to travel. Lynn was applying to universities. Ava had received her first acceptance letter from a literary journal. I was considering changing careers, maybe going back to school for something I actually enjoyed. Mom's lawyer trying to make Lynn sound confused while she's literally showing scars is like trying to convince someone the sky isn't blue while they're looking right at it. As we talked and laughed and made plans, I realized something profound. Mom had tried to break us by making us compete. She'd wanted to create perfect, isolated achievers who would always need her approval. Instead, she'd forged us into something stronger. We'd learned to support each other through the worst imaginable circumstances. We'd chosen love over competition, unity over division. The apartment was still small and cramped. Money was still tight. We still carried scars, physical and emotional, from our childhood. But we'd built something Mom could never understand or destroy. A real family, bound not by blood or obligation or achievement, but by choice and genuine love. That night, as my siblings settled in for bed, I stood by our small window looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Mom was alone with her achievement boards and golden child throne. Maybe she'd find new victims. Maybe she'd finally face the emptiness of her system. I didn't know, and found I didn't care. We'd survived. More than that, we'd thrived. We'd taken the worst thing about our childhood, the competition that was meant to tear us apart, and transformed it into the foundation of our strongest bond. We were no longer competing siblings, but a united force, facing the world together. The golden child system was dead. In its place, we'd built something infinitely more valuable. A family where everyone was golden, where love wasn't earned through grades or achievements, but given freely, where support replaced sabotage and cooperation conquered competition. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. We still had healing to do, dreams to chase, lives to build, but we'd face it all together. 4 siblings who'd learned that the greatest achievement wasn't being the best, but lifting each other up. Mom had tried to create winners and losers. Instead, she'd created an unbreakable team. I smiled and turned away from the window. Lynn was already asleep, finally at a healthy weight and peaceful. Piper was reading, his anxiety managed and controlled. Ava was writing in her journal, processing our journey into art. This small apartment held more love than our big childhood home ever had. We were home, not because of where we lived, but because we were together. The golden children had escaped their cage and learned to fly, and that was the greatest victory of all.